All right, today we're going to be talking about all of the planets in the seventh house in astrology, giving you the full meaning explained. First, we're going to be going through the physical manifestations of the seventh house, how that is affected by each planet. Then the psychological manifestations, how that's going to be altered and shifts between each planet placed into the seventh house. And when we talk about the psychological and physical manifestations and how they're affected by each planet, we'll be going over the light manifestations and the shadow manifestations. Okay? So, as we've done with all the other videos, the first 6 videos in this series, and now we're on the 7th, the all-important house of relationships and partnerships, we place each of these archetypes into this area of life, and it lights up that area of the chart, making it more important, more prominent in your life. Wherever you have planets are going to be areas of your life that are more important, more prominent, areas where more pieces of your consciousness are going to be existing, so therefore it'll manifest in more conspicuous ways, more prominent ways, potent ways, okay? Visible ways as well, to other people and to yourself as well. So we take the first planet, as we always do, put it in the 7th. You have the sun, which is the king, the father, the leader, the masculine piece, part of your consciousness. These are not all of the archetypes, as I've said before in past videos. These are just the general overviews. But here we have the sun, which is, like I said, the king, the father, the leader, the masculine part of one's consciousness. And so when it comes to the physical manifestations of the 7th house, it involves trade, your partnerships, and relationships. And so when you boil it down, it's really just exchanging equally in an ideal world with other people. Win-win relationships, win-win partnerships, harmonized or harmonic relationships, okay? And so how does that manifest when you have the sun there in the context of your relationships, your partnerships, and your exchanges, your trade with other people? And this trade can manifest in many different ways, right? Well, you will have, in the context of your relationships, will be part of your destiny. Wherever the sun is that's your destiny. So when you have the sun there, relationships, exchanging with other people, developing close partnerships, which are not just your sexual or romantic partnerships, but can also be close friends, or like I said, if you're trading with somebody, a business partner, any relationship where it is one-on-one and it is a powerful exchange, usually on equal footing. Not the child parent, not the abuser abused unless it's afflicted, but an equal exchange. When you have the sun there, your destiny is in relationships. That means that these 7th house or 7th house things, trade, exchanges, partnerships, are very important, very prominent, an essential part of your life in general, okay? It also means that these partnerships, within the context of partnerships, somebody will have to take the lead. Usually, it will be the other person will have to take the lead or will embody the characteristics of the sun, because the 7th house is the opposite of you, right? The first house is the most you when it comes to your physical identity, your body. The 7th house is the mirror. It is your partner. It is the mirror of you. So mirrored to you through another person, through your trading partner, your romantic partner, your dating life, your boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, I think you get the point, right? Mirrored through that other person is sun, the sun qualities. So that involves being a leader, having consistency, having stability. These are things that you will usually find in your relationships or be seeking in your relationships is stability, consistency, honor, the sun, okay? Having a strong, powerful purpose, being part of your destiny. You're finding partners or relationships that are aligned with what you feel is your destiny, what you feel is your purpose. Sometimes the relationships themselves can be what your overarching destiny is or what your natural state of being is longing for, making the sun very important, but also relationships very important in the context of working with other people and exchanging with other people. And also working with leaders too. You might find yourself attracting leaders or kingly people or people who have a status or an authority, but an inspiring authority, not like a restrictive, more disciplinary authority like if Saturn was there, which we'll get to later, but more of like a kingly, authoritarian, fatherly, patriarchal energy in your partners. And when it comes to the psychological manifestations, or well, actually, okay, I got ahead of myself. That was the light manifestations. The shadow manifestation of that is finding somebody who is inconsistent or working with other people who are inconsistent, not noble at all. They're lying, they're deceitful. They don't know how to lead, they don't know how to take charge. They're fickle and feeble and unreliable, childish in their nature, overly focused on external validation and more trivial things and not willing to make the sacrifices. And with the sun there, with the sun in the seventh, wherever the sun is, you're also going to have to make some sacrifices to fulfill your destiny, to fulfill a higher purpose that is aligned with your higher self, which is what the sun represents, to align with your archetypal nature. So when you have the sun there, you also will have to make sacrifices. Sacrifices will have to be made. And you are willing to make the sacrifices in the context of a relationship if the sun is doing well. If the sun is doing poorly, then sacrifices will be more difficult, or they're going to be more painful, or they'll be avoided altogether. So there's not going to be a compromise. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be ego battles, which can also be manifestations of the sun when it is afflicted. But the major thing is fickleness, inconsistency, and let's say also on the opposite and the other end of the spectrum, because the shadow always operates at the different poles, right? At the extremes, where the healthy light manifestations are in the middle. The other end is overly rigid, overly authoritative, maybe a partners or partnerships where there is that power imbalance. And so either you might be too much of an authority figure and oppressing the other person, or the other person is an oppressive force where both people are not being heard within the context of a relationship, okay? Or it's just two people who don't have the will, don't have the strength to make the proper sacrifices to make a diplomatic, harmonious, dynamic exchange relationship. And so it leads to problems. When it comes to the psychological manifestations, because the seventh house represents your partnerships, your partner, your sex life, your dating life, not marriage necessarily, that's the ninth house. So we're not talking about marriage like the spiritual union, the higher or the legal or spiritual union, because ninth house is a spiritual house, philosophical house, but the ninth house is also the house of law and your beliefs and your morals and your creed. So that's like the union of those two people, of like there's a purpose, there's a meaning. The seventh house is just the exchange. Now there's an added layer of purpose and meaning added there if the sun's there or if Jupiter's there, because you get some of those dharmic qualities from those dharmic-like planets. But when it comes to the psychological manifestations, what you'll be attracted to and what you'll be developing in yourself, the qualities you'll be developing in yourself when you're in a partnership, because the planets in the seventh house are what you're going to be getting. You're going to be developing these planets when you're in a partnership, when you're in relationships, when you're exchanging with other people. When you have that dynamic, that usually that one-on-one exchange, whether it's a best friend, business partner, or boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, which are like the major ones I'm talking about, right? And also taking social action, which is a comma angle house. You're taking actions towards fulfilling your pleasures, comma, and desires, which are usually fulfilled through another person, which I've talked about in my previous series when I went through all of the psychological aspects of the house. So you got the sun there, you're developing your solar qualities within the context of relationships, and these are the things that you will be very attracted to in another person. The sun's healthy, the light manifestation, you will be attracting partners who are solar, right? So they can be dominant, they can take charge, they can lead, they have a healthy masculine, right? They have a healthy masculine aura, energy, and they're reliable because the sun is the most reliable planet. Every day it comes up at the same time. Well, not the same time, but depending on the time of the year, but it transitions across the ecliptic at the same time of the year every year. It is the most consistent planet. It's always there, whether the clouds are there or not. So the sun is consistent. It does what it does all the time. Where other planets, their paths it varies depending on the time of year or the year itself or the seasons, and you get the point, right? But the sun is the most consistent planet. Never a miscommunication with the sun. You know where it's going to be. So when healthy, sun in the seventh house, your partners are like that. They show up for you. They're consistent. They do what they say. They have confidence too. That's another thing. You feel confident in relationships and your partners, and usually that is facilitated or supported by the fact that your partner feels confident in general. So you attract confident people, confident partners, and therefore that makes you feel more confident in yourself and within the relationship as well. The shadow manifestation is, like I said, if somebody's fickle, unreliable, dishonorable, will say something that they're going to do and they do the opposite, or they can't be relied on, or they're overly egotistical, overly dominant, oppressive in a way, or the opposite is that they don't have that power, that energy, and so then you are oppressive by nature and feeding off of their weakness unconsciously, whatever it may be, just based off of the power scales being imbalanced. I mean, if there's going to be an imbalance in power in a relationship, doesn't even matter if both people are good people, naturally something's going to give and somebody's going to get stepped on, because it's like the law of nature. It's a human fact of when we smell weakness, there's this part of us when we're not conscious enough that can take advantage of it unconsciously. But if both partners are conscious, then there's an equal exchange, there's an equal respect and understanding between the two people. But we're talking about an afflicted sun in this context. And so, yeah, it can lead to lack of confidence, insecurity in yourself, or the partner feels insecure, but that's going to be, in a partnership and an exchange of two equal people, or at least they're supposed to be equal standing within the context of that relationship. If one of them feels insecure, both of them are going to have a certain level of insecurity, right? One of them feels confident, there's going to be a level of confidence, right? Not saying there's always going to be exactly the same amount of confidence or insecurity between the two people involved, but the emotions are going to bleed in between the two people. And so this can be somebody, if the sun's afflicted, that attracts people who are unreliable, that don't show up, that can be, abusive or overly domineering or things of that nature. It can make for very difficult relationships, partnerships, and exchanges where either you or the partner, the other person, does not feel like they're getting everything they need out of the relationship. But a healthy sun means that both people feel like they have equal standing, equal say, equal power within the relationship, which is the ideal. Next, we have the moon. You put the queen, the mother, the child or inner child mind, and the feminine aspects of one's consciousness, one's being, put it in the 7th house. For the physical, again, it can describe your partner as well, but your relationship dynamic in general. So this can be a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more fickle than the sun, at least when it's operating properly. Meaning that the relationships are supporting how you feel and your emotions, right? And so that can change. So that means the partners might change more often. Sun usually will have longer term relationships because the sun is more consistent, it's more steadfast, it's more firm. So when it has a partner, when it chooses a partner, it's more locked in. Again, if the sun's afflicted, that can make things more difficult, especially if you have the North Node Rahu with the sun. But when you have the moon there, you might have more, movement going on with relationships, meaning that, you might feel one way, a certain way, or a certain day. And so therefore, the tides, like the moon changing with the tides, will change with the partners. Doesn't mean that, in the context of like you're going to be changing relationship partners all the time, but it could be somebody who has a large social circle or exchanges with a lot of different people, whether it be in business, trade, or just in general relationships. And in the context of a relationship, it's a relationship that's going to have to be adaptable. The relationship itself is going to have to be more adaptable based off of the feelings and the emotions of the individuals. Less destiny-based, less duty-based, and more comfort-based. Feeling good is more important than fulfilling one's destiny. With the sun in the 7th, you can have a person that partners with somebody to fulfill their destiny. With the moon in the 7th, you have somebody who's partnering with somebody because they want to feel good, or that other person is meant to feel good, or because it's a comforting thing. The relationship is the comfort zone. Wherever the moon is your comfort zone. So the relationships, the partnerships are meant to elicit positive emotions, make you feel emotionally tranquil, to regulate your emotions within the context of relationships, partnerships, and exchanges with other people. Okay? And trade exchange. So you're going to have lunar qualities, right? So there's going to be nurturing, care, support, again, adaptability, and making sure that people's basic emotional needs are being met, and a strong connection with one's inner children between the two partners, right? There's always going to be a melding of the inner children of the two people involved in a partnership, even in business, even in close friendships, which can be signified by the 7th house, but especially in romantic relationships and in your dating life and in your marriage. But especially when the moon's there, right? It's going to be very prominent. The inner child is going to be seeking strongly that other person, and could be also describing the other person looking for somebody to support, care for their inner child. These can be very deep, emotionally dense relationships that are really focused on emotional regulation and connection. For the psychological manifestations, again, what you're attracted to, what you're magnetically drawn to, what acts as your mirror, and the planet and qualities that you'll be developing within the context of your relationship is going to be, again, the moon qualities, right? Caring, nurturing, motherly support, more of the feminine, intuitive faculties, the imaginative faculties as well, because the moon represents your imagination, the mind, developing one's consciousness and mind, supporting and connecting mentally with this other person on a deeper level, not the intellectual level, which is more Mercury, but on that deep emotional level. You're going to be developing your own intuition, your ability to care for other people, learning about how to care for yourself and care about your own inner children. This is a very, very powerful placement. One of my good friends, dear friends, has moon in the 7th, and he is kind of a playboy. He's out in these streets a little bit. But on the surface, you think, oh, well, that's because he doesn't care about relationships, or he's very respectful about it. He moves like a gentleman to the best of his ability. So it's not in that situation of like a full fuckboy energy. But it's more in the sense of he feels deeply when he's fully committed to somebody. And so he adapts himself and interacts with different people because he's looking to make sure that he feels safe. And so safety is especially, obviously emotions and safety are always important in relationships, but again, this is really, really important. It can make somebody very, very vulnerable in relationships, emotionally vulnerable in relationships. Where in other areas of life, they might be tough and reserved or more reserved or whatever, or more solid or stoic. Especially if you say you had like moon in the 7th and Saturn in the 1st, you would be very surprised to see them in the context of their relationships would be very, very different than what is being presented to the world. Okay? All right. Oh, and the negative manifestation, I keep forgetting the shadow manifestations, my apologies. So the negative shadow manifestations of this is a partnership that doesn't involve care, doesn't involve nurturing. There's a fear of connecting, right? An afflicted moon means that somebody who doesn't find themselves able to feel safe in relationships ever, or they attract partners who don't make them feel safe, who trigger negative emotions and don't take care and hold space for the other person. Holding space is very, very important within the context of relationships when you have moon in the 7th house. And so you will attract people in your life that don't hold space, or you yourself will not be able to hold space for other people and nurture their own emotions. And the inner children will be at odds with each other. There will be misunderstandings. There will be internal conflict. There will be emotional outbursts and turmoil. And that emotional fickleness is actually toxic and pathological, not nurturing and adaptive to one's moving needs, developing needs in the moment, because we're constantly needing new things. Like, we grow up and become adults, but we're all kids inside, right? There's a meme that's like, everyone's 12. Like, we like to present we're all these adults and we all everything figured out. We get tattoos, we wear nice clothes, or we get big titles, we get all these degrees, we make lots of money, we get big house, we have a nice partner, we have kids, and we think we're still not just figuring it out as sentient monkeys on this planet. Okay? So partnerships can really trigger a wounded inner child when you have an afflicted moon in the 7th, especially say you had North Node there, South Node there, Ketu, Rahu, or Saturn can cause some problems there. Even moon with the sun can make a rigidity to it, okay? And also when it comes to the shadow manifestations of the moon, there could be a rigidity where the relationship is not adapting to your emotional needs, and those emotional needs go uncared for. They're neglected within the context of a relationship. By you, because you want to make the other partner happy, or by that partner because they don't give a flying fuck how you feel. And so that can be very toxic and detrimental when you have moon in the 7th. All right, so now we do Mars, which is the warrior, general, pioneer, the will. And so this can be difficult. Obviously, the dignity and the aspects and the quality of the 7th Lord has something to say, but just on its face in a vacuum, Mars in the 7th can cause, that's right, conflict, competition, very strong-willed individuals. You can have ego battles with the sun in the 7th, for sure, but you could have almost a combative domineering, survival of the fittest, dog eat dog world within the context of your trade, your exchange, and your partnerships. Because again, seventh house is about equal exchange, working with other people on equal footing, equal mutual respect. Mars is all about kill or be killed, survival of the fittest. May the strong survive and the weak fall away into the ashes, right? Because it's about fighting and the warrior spirit, not in the sense of like hurting other people just to hurt other people, but moving towards what you want viciously, aggressively, okay? And attaining it. So in the context of relationships, in the arena of your trade, partnerships, relationships, there can be conflict, there can be strong wills, there can be individualistic desires that are very powerful, there can be a deep hunger. These are all things Mars represents. There can be a fiery dynamic going on. It can be a lot of passion though, right? You know, there's a lot of emotional depth when you have the moon there. There's a lot of consistent action and fulfilling higher duties and responsibilities when the sun is there, like your inspirations, building something beautiful when the sun's there. Mars, it's fulfilling that hunger, passionate, fiery, sexy. I mean, Mars represents visceral sex, not romantic, sensual sex like Venus, but that, you know, when you're getting after it. That's Mars. That's the kind, that's Mars. So when you have Mars there, a lot of passion, a lot of fire, but can lead to conflict, lead to infighting. Obviously, that's more the shadow side, but even if it's fully healthy, there's going to be competition. But when it's healthy, the light manifestation is that the competition makes both people better. Both people push each other through that pressure, through a little bit of antagonism, some individuality of step up. And each person places certain expectations on the other person to rise to the occasion, to train, to get better, to fight, to overcome the obstacles and problems that arise in both of their lives. Or partnerships that solve problems, that overcome obstacles, that help a person defeat their enemies. These are things that Mars can represent. Okay? Especially if Mars is ruling the sixth house. That is real. So the partnerships will help solve problems, help deal with the emergencies in one's life. These are things that Mars represents. If it's shadow manifestation, when it comes to the relationships, partnerships, just a lot of fighting, a lot of combativeness, can have physical stuff, like violence, things that are very detrimental to one's physical being, one's emotional state, spiritual state. You get the point. We don't have to go too many details, but Mars can lead to like some intense negative dynamics within the context of relationships. I had a former client who had Mars in the seventh house, and in the beginning it was chill, but he dealt with infidelity, the other person, and then with this new person that he's married to, there is a lot of fighting, bickering. There's the combativeness. The partner's attempting to make him better, and he's attempting to make his partner better, but if people don't rise to the occasion, or if it's not conveyed in the right way, or if the other person is trying, or if they're both trying to make the other person into something they're not, well, then that's the shadow manifestation, okay? So there's that. And when it comes to the psychological manifestations, right, like what you're attracted to, how you're in the qualities you develop in yourself within the context of relationships, and what makes you take social action, how you take social action, right, with the seventh house, it's Mars. So you're going to have a warrior spirit, a pioneering spirit. You'll be attracted to people who have pioneering warrior spirit, have a strong will, fiery personalities, passionate personalities, people who have a hunger and a fire for life. And as you are in your relationship, you will develop that Mars energy. You will develop your passion. You will develop that hunger, that fire for life. This person that I mentioned, my former client, he, outside of the context of his relationship, did not have a lot of passion, did not have a lot of fire. Did what he had to do, went through the motions, did his duty, and made sure that he had his basic needs met. He had a good moon. So just making sure his basic needs were met, right? But his partner is pushing him to go above and beyond, to develop himself, to use his will and his willpower to stop doing certain things that are detrimental to his health, and start doing things that are supportive and beneficial to his health, using his Mars more. And so if you have Mars in the 7th, you'll be developing your own Mars more. And you will be pushed to develop that will, that fire. And it will be usually in the form of somebody antagonizing you or competing with you or pushing you. Usually your partners or very close friends or trade partners, business partners will be pushing you. Now, if the shadow manifestation, if it's afflicted, if it's in a bad state, 7th house is in bad shape, well, then you will not be able to rise to the occasion, or it'll not be, or you will attract people who are actually not pushing you in a healthy way. They're actually just violent or destructive or perverse. And that's just naturally what you are magnetically drawn to, because there is healing that needs to be done. You need to heal that inner child. You need to heal that part of yourself that is attracting these toxic partners that you think are pushing you to be better or making your life more exciting or making your life more dynamic, or they have certain qualities that are good, like they are pioneering, they have a strong will, they are able to be a general and take individual action for their own ideas and convictions and beliefs, ideas, Mars. But they're also abusive, they're also negative figures, they're also destructive in a lot of ways towards themselves and you. So Mars, whether it's in good shape or bad, there's a lot going on. It's not going to be an overly chill experience in the context of your relationships when you have Mars there. Now you have Mercury, a little bit more chill on its face, right? And again, so remember, this is the general overview. If you have multiple planets in there, you're going to have to mix these concepts together. Also, North Node Rahu Ketu in there is going to change things. Also, the Lord of the 7th house is going to affect it. The planet that rules the sign that has the 7th house or holds the 7th house cusp. So these are just a general basic foundational description, which will be colored and layered upon depending on the sign, the Lord of the 7th house, and other planets going on in the 7th, and also aspects. But this is just a general core foundation when I talk about these. And this is the case for all the houses and all the planets that we do in the future. Okay? And if you're resonating with this, please remember to leave a comment, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you want to share those. But I also just love when people share their charts and describe their life and seeing how astrology manifests in so many different unique ways. Because as we all are living our life, we're constantly learning, right? And the more I can be exposed to your lives and your experiences and hear your stories, the more that I learn about myself and the universe around me. So I appreciate you guys for participating as well, making this a nice little astrology community as we slowly build up. So now we have Mercury, the scientist, the observer, the detective, the intellect. So within the context of relationships, partnerships, and trade, and these equal dynamics, ideally, if healthy, there is a lightheartedness to it. There's a playfulness. There's an ability to try different things and experiment, whether it be with different people or experiment and try different things within the context of a relationship to see what works for both people, works for everybody. A lot of good communication, a lot of exchanging of ideas and developing, faculties, being able to plan, develop skills, right, together. And Mercury is the planet that is best at manifesting in the concrete reality, believe it or not, because Mercury represents skills, talents, abilities, information, the intellect, and totally forgot. Manifest logistics. Can't manifest anything without logistics. You can have amazing genius ideas, but if you don't have the skills and the logistics and the acumen and the ability to communicate, you can't manifest it in this world. So to manifest anything, you need a good Mercury. Or you need to develop a good Mercury and develop your mercurial skills. So there can be an ability to manifest with a partner in very concrete ways, very efficiently. Now this can be because you have a good Mercury because of the placement, or the partners that you attract are very mercurial and they can balance you out. Okay? And when it comes to the shadow manifestation, though, within the context of relationships, partnerships, trade, there can be lack of communication, lack of planning, poor planning, an inability to develop skills, a lack of skill, or a lot of confusion, a lot of vagueness. Part of the reason why Mercury doesn't do too well or isn't too strong, let's say, not bad, but it's not very strong. No, it doesn't have a lot of natural energy in Pisces is because it's the ocean, it's disillusion. So there can be confusion in relationships. There could be an inability to know what to hold on to, what to try for a little bit and let go of, or what to develop and refine, which is also Mercury. There could also be emotional clinging, especially if the moon, Cancer, or the moon are involved with Mercury, clinging on to certain partners or partnerships that are not beneficial. Some people that come into our life, whether it be best friends, trade partners, business partners, boyfriends, girlfriends, dating partners, some people are just there to be there for a short time, not a long time, or for a good time. The problem arises if you hold on to people that are not really supposed to be there for much longer, and so you're kind of beating a dead horse, or you're trying to milk a dead cow or something. I forgot. I don't know what the saying is, but you get the point, right? You're trying to milk a cow that can't give you milk. Trying to milk a bull. Yes, that was a joke. Okay, I'll continue with the astrology. Yes, so you're trying to milk a cow that doesn't give milk. So that can be an afflicted Mercury in the 7th house. That's how it can affect your relationships. Also relationships where, and there's not good communication in the sense that, listening and speaking, right? So one person needs to know when to listen at the right time and then speak at the right time, and vice versa. There could be a miscommunication where somebody's probably doing most of the listening and somebody's probably doing most of the talking, or they're listening and talking at the wrong time, and there's kind of like that lost in translation type energy, okay? When it comes to the psychological manifestations, what you're attracted to, what mirrors you, and what qualities you're developing in your relationships, mercurial qualities you're developing, your interests, your curiosity, your ability to experiment, be a detective, observe things, right? Utilize your intellect. Mercury in the 7th, when healthy, can have a very intellectually forward relationship. And Mercury is also about friendships and games and play. So there can be a lot of fun and play and games and intellectual development and curiosity going on when you have Mercury in the 7th and it's doing well. If it's afflicted, then there's not a lot of fun. There's not a lot of games. There's not a lot of lightheartedness. There can be a seriousness and austerity, or there can be a lack of observance, meaning that both people are not observing each other to see what they actually need. Both people are not willing to try out things with the other person and experiment with the other person, or experiment with things with that other person, because there's a rigidity, there's an affliction, there's a confusion, whatever the affliction's going on with Mercury. Okay? And like I said, attracted to, you most likely be attracted to people who are witty, intellectual, scientific, experimental. When healthy and when not, they will be lacking in those qualities, or they may present themselves in that way, but it's a facade. They're not actually, or I don't want to say not actually intelligent, but the things they communicate and the things that they present as expertise or that they're skilled at are not, it's very shallow, okay? It's not a very deep, skilled mastery going on, which can be also a problem with Mercury in general, of just being too surface, being too trivial, not going deep enough with things, not really getting to the meat or to the bone, whichever term you want to use. Now we're doing Venus. So we got Venus up in this house. Needless to say, Venus is probably going to do pretty well here, right? Venus is the house, the planet of relationships, and the house of relationships, partnerships, trade, right? Exchange. So this can give very diplomatic, harmonious, beautiful partnerships. There can be, a natural intuitive connection between these two people, a lot of sensual pleasures and stimulus, even if it's with a friend, right? A friend that you eat delicious foods with, or go to beautiful places with, or have a natural bond with, or have, matching styles, or they help you develop your style, you help them develop your style, which is more of the psychological manifestations, but you get the point. Just in general, a lot of beauty, cohesion, harmony, and external material fulfillment and satisfaction and sensual pleasure and desires being fulfilled in the context of your trade, relationships, and partnerships. Afflicted, obviously, is you can have relationships that are very shallow, overly focused, overly vain, too focused on sensual pleasures and stimulating the senses, or on beauty, or on aesthetics, not really being able to go deeper and connect on a more emotional moon level, or get something done that has meaning and purpose, like Jupiter, or fulfill your destiny, like the sun, or develop one's skills, or improve upon that relationship and actually develop yourself in the other person, or manifest things, which is more Mercury, or get problems done, achieve things, overcome obstacles and enemies, deal with the survival things that involve life, like Mars. But with Venus, it could just be very surface, all about looks, all about how things are portrayed, all about external validation from other people, getting in partnerships because of what other people will think, not really actually aligned with who you are as a person, like the sun, or your emotions and how you feel, the moon, or what you think is right, or what you want to fight for, feel like you need to be moving towards, like Mars. But Venus, yeah, can be a trivial, surface, eventually tiresome, and almost hedonistic relationship if it's afflicted. When it comes to psychology, the psychological manifestations when Venus is in the seventh house, well, you are looking for, lack of a better term, most likely looking for aesthetically pleasing, beautiful partners. That's what you're attracted to. Also, creativity, so a creative partner or an artistic partner, or one that is able to provide and stimulate the senses in a beautiful way. So it'd be like, just random examples, like a fashion designer, artist, could be a chef, right? Or somebody who, has the resources to provide all of those beautiful things to you, or, support you in getting those things for you. Also somebody who is graceful and brings harmony into the relationship and knows how to be diplomatic. Okay. So embodies the Venusian qualities. And those are the things you'll be developing yourself as well. The ability to be more harmonious, diplomatic, dynamic, stimulate your own senses or stimulate other people's senses, or develop your own aesthetic beauty and style and appearance, and being more socially graceful and be able to exchange with other people and get the things you need from other people. You'll be developing your Venus in the context of relationships, even feeling more beautiful and attractive to yourself, right? Because that matters. You can be attracted to yourself. You can think you're beautiful. You can think you're ugly, right? It's all based on our perception and how we see ourselves, and is tied to our self-worth, which is something that Venus represents very strongly. If this is afflicted, there can be insecurity within the context of relationships, not feeling worthy to be partners with people that come into our life. There can be, like I said before, superficiality to it, only being attracted to people just the way that they look, being very surface, being very shallow in the way that you're attracted to, or attracting partners that are very shallow, only care about the way that you look. And so you feel like the only thing that matters in the context of that relationship is that you look good or you present yourself good, but not actually being genuine. Feeling like you always have to keep the peace within the context of relationships. There can't be any fighting. Mars is usually the opposite, right? It's like there's just naturally always going to be some kind of conflict and you feel like you can never reach harmony. Where with Venus, it's like, goes toxic the other way, where it's like, okay, it has to be harmonious. If it's not, the relationship's crumbling. And so I need to change myself, or that person needs to change themselves to make sure this is always beautiful, beautiful, harmonized, and pleasing, right? Or making sure that if, the senses aren't pleased, or if the aesthetics aren't pleased, or if people don't think we look good, or things don't look good within the context of this relationship, then it's useless. It's pointless. It doesn't matter. But as you can see with all these other planets, right, there's so much more that can be manifest within a relationship. But you want to look at the sign, the Lord, planets in the seventh, to really determine how that entire picture is going to come together. Now we do. Oh, and also there can be, with an afflicted Venus shadow, there could be a lot of people pleasing, whether it's the partner people pleasing or you people pleasing, or codependence. To just put it simply, there can be a strong codependent dynamic going on within the context of that relationship. Okay? Because Venus wants to please. Venus wants everyone to be happy. Venus wants to compromise and be diplomatic where everyone feels like they're getting what they need. And so if there's any kind of imbalance in the relationship, an afflicted Venus is going to be very, very sensitive to that. Even if it's temporary, because there's going to be imbalances within the context of a relationship. Obviously, overall, you want there to be an equal balance, but sometimes somebody's going to be getting something they want and the other person's not going to be getting what they want. And that's okay, right? There's no hard and fast rule. Now with Jupiter, you have the guru, the priest, the philosopher, the guide in the seventh house. So as we said before, when you have Jupiter in a place, in a house, it brings fortune, it brings luck, it brings wisdom, it brings expansion. So Jupiter in the seventh, when it comes to the physical manifestations, it can bring a lot of opportunity, a lot of luck, a lot of fortune within the context of your relationships, your partnerships, in your trade and your exchanges with other people. There can bring a natural wisdom within the context. So meaning both people are talking about philosophy, talking about religion, talking about higher order things, or approaching the relationship or life together, or the things that they're working on together with wisdom, with purpose and meaning. Okay. And these relationships too can provide guidance in life in general, because you have the guide, can provide abundance as well. So either have an abundance of partnerships, relationships, partners at your disposal, or those partnerships, relationships, and exchanges produce abundance, bring in, manifest real abundance, can bring in money too. Jupiter is the money planet. So you can get money within the context of your relationships, your partnerships, and in your exchanges. Obviously, in general, you think, oh, well, of course, who doesn't, especially if you're trading with somebody, but it's like more so. It's more of an emphasis because you can get emotional fulfillment from your relationships. You can get game skills, more tangible things like Venus, sensually pleasurable things. Jupiter is what you use to usually get Venus. So you use money to get the luxuries that Venus provides. You could also have a lot of luxuries in your relationships when you have it in the seventh, going back to Venus. But Jupiter, it's like money, it's abundance, it's meaning, it's purpose. Big picture, right? But the shadow manifestation of that is arrogance within the context of your relationships, overindulgence. Very easy to see, having too many partners, whether they be friends or even romantic partners. Sex life that might be a little bit too dubious, a little bit too abundant, can be problematic, right? Can be, like I said, arrogance within the context of a relationship, where it can also just be like delusional, meaning there's just too much going on, or an overemphasis on higher order concepts, but not actually manifesting those things. So it's like head in the clouds, or focusing too much on the big picture, but not enough Mercury, where it's like, okay, cool, you have a big vision in this relationship, you have a greater purpose, a greater desire. I would say greater desire, that's more Mars, but a greater purpose, a greater meaning, a goal, Jupiter, in that context of that partnership. But you don't know how to get there because Mercury is afflicted, or Mercury's not doing well, or because Jupiter's afflicted, whatever it may be. The bigger picture is overly emphasized, and the little picture, the little steps that actually gets to that goal, is de-emphasized or completely ignored. And that can be pathological, that can be negative, obviously. Psychologically speaking, right, when you're taking social action, things you're attracted to, the aspects of yourself you're developing in the context of your relationships, partnerships, trade, exchanges. Obviously, Jupiter qualities, right? You develop your own inner wisdom. You develop your own inner guidance. You develop your philosophical faculties and your spiritual connections and your spiritual abilities. You find greater meaning in your life and greater purpose in your life. And you're attracted to people who bring those things into your life, who bring abundance, who bring money, who bring wealth, who bring in their wisdom and their guidance and their spiritual and philosophical perspectives. And they bring it into your life. And you're attracted to those things. And so people who embody those things come into your life because it's helping you develop those in yourself. Because again, first house is you when it comes to the houses, right? Not the planets are different, but the houses, this is you, this is your partnerships, this is your mirror. This is furthest from you, these planets in the seventh. So you're developing them, and you develop them within the context of a relationship. So usually what happens is when you have planets in the seventh, you won't get those outside of your relationship. So the double-edged sword, or the downside, could be if you have some really good planets in your seventh house, you have a really strong seventh house. To get those planets, you need to be exchanging. So it can inspire you to work with other people. It can inspire you and in a lot of cases force you to work with other people and to get in relationships and partnerships and exchanges. But the downside, the detriment, is that outside of those relationships, outside of those partnerships and trade and exchanges, you don't get those planets as strongly. So that's why Jupiter actually can be difficult, because if your goodness, your abundance, your wealth, your wisdom, your guidance really is lit up when you're in relationships, that means when you're alone, it'd be more difficult. So you have to really make sure you're consciously carrying over those things that you found and felt in your relationships into your life if you are single, or when you're single. Okay? It's a conscious activity. It's not going to naturally happen as easily if, say, Jupiter was in the first house, where it's just like you don't even have to think about it. It just the luck, the fortune, the wisdom follows you all the time, especially when you're alone. If anything, more so when you're alone. And the negative manifestation is somebody who may attract false gurus or charlatans or arrogant partners or partners who project a bigger picture or greater wisdom and they don't actually embody it, or they don't know actually how to guide. Or you yourself, the native, it's the person who has Jupiter in the seventh, is resistant to that guidance or blocks off that abundance or is too blind to see the wisdom and the value that they attract in those partners, right? And so they just feel like they project that goodness and that abundance onto other people and think that's for other people to embody, but not themselves. Or they block it off from other people entirely and they just think it's not for me. I don't see it because it's so far away. The seventh is furthest away from the first house. So Jupiter in the seventh can be difficult, especially if it's afflicted, where you have relationships that are, too good to be true, or too up in the clouds, but not really practical and grounded in reality, which something like Mercury can bring a lot more groundedness to. But also Mercury has its problems too, because if Mercury becomes pathological in the seventh, well, then it's just the little things and there's no greater meaning, there's no greater purpose. Needless to say, life is hard because you got to find that secret sauce, and there's no one size fits all. There's no easy answer to anything. It's just a constant developing and working with the particular context that each person is maneuvering in their incarnation. All right, now we got to the last one, Saturn, which is the servant, the elderly, the authority figures, but more of like the disciplinarians, and the shadow. So we have Saturn in the seventh. This actually does better than you would think. I know you would think, what, Saturn causes problems, and it does, but to have it in the seventh, furthest away from you, is actually a good thing. It has the most dig ball in the seventh. So how does it manifest physically? Well, one, it brings restrictions to the amount of relationships, partnerships, and exchanges you have in your life, which, believe it or not, is actually, if you're looking within the context of spiritual development, is actually a good thing, because it allows you to focus on yourself and developing yourself and not overly relying on other people to develop yourself and to find meaning and purpose and things of that nature. So Saturn there will usually bring restrictions, bring discipline, bring tradition and austerity to one's partnerships, relationships, will have certain restrictions. There'll be patience being enacted in the relationships. There can be, obviously, in the more shadow manifestation, some fear, some trauma that is either worked through, healed, or developed within the context of relationships and partnerships and exchanges. There can be a frugalness and a scarcity mindset when one is dealing with partners or feeling like one can't attract partners or things like that. But this develops the self. So because of the lack of abundance that, say, Jupiter or even Mercury can give, even Venus can give in the seventh, Saturn forces the person to develop oneself and focus on themselves to evolve and develop. So seventh actually can make relationships difficult. They can also bring delays to relationships or partnerships or exchanges. Delays, debts, insecurities. Again, this sounds awful, especially because you're most likely in the West watching this. I'm in the West, I'm in America. But in the West, it's like relationships are everything. We watch movies, the whole point is the relationship, finding your love, all that stuff. But when it comes to your spiritual development, relationships, 9 times out of 10, unless you get married and find the one, 9 times out of 10 are actually a distraction. They actually take you away from your dharma. They actually take you away from your path, right? The most dharma house is the first house. It's you, it's your path. Seventh house is karma, pleasure. And so Saturn forces you away from the pleasures, away from the things that are not you, which is the seventh house, and pushes you towards your first house so you develop yourself. And so through the restrictions, through the difficulties and the delays and the fears and the trauma that can manifest in the context of relationships, you are forced to develop yourself and to become a better person and not need relationships and not have to rely on partnerships as much as the average person, because you have a certain humility and realistic approach to it. Even with the seventh house too, same thing. Jupiter, you could be overly optimistic. Like, oh, this person's the best thing since sliced cheese, and can get lost in the sauce when it comes to a relationship, a partnership, right? Or even Venus, right? It's just like overly focusing on how attractive they are, all the sensual pleasures they're getting in the seventh. Not saying it's bad inherently, but there's problems that can arise. Where seventh, Saturn usually approaches or comes into relationships with a pretty level head, takes a relatively realistic approach to relationships and partnerships and exchanges. Now, like I said, downside is that there can be extra fear, there can be scarcity, there can be delays, that can be painful. But when that happens, that's just forcing you to focus on yourself and develop yourself. Again, Saturn can be good. I mean, unless, if it's in Aries, if it's, if it's really starred, really afflicted, you can have power struggles, you can have authoritarian relationships where, one partner is too restrictive or both people feel restricted or claustrophobic within the context of a relationship. But again, that would mean that it pushes you towards working on yourself and working on your individual development, which, at least for me, I'm biased. I always support that because that's why I think we're here on this crazy, fucked up planet that forces us to develop ourselves and maneuver all the trials and tribulations that is this crazy school, spiritual school called Earth. Psychologically speaking, what you're attracted to, what you develop in yourself, what inspires, or what moves you, motivates you to take social action. Well, when you're approaching social action, you're going to be slower. Saturn, there's going to be some delays. So you'll be less impulsive when you're pursuing your pleasures. You'll probably think things through a little bit better, which is good. And when it comes to people you're attracted to people who are patient, who might have a more stoic vibe, will be attracted to stoic energy, disciplined energy, minimalistic energies, minimalistic people who might be more serious, but like I said, disciplined, self-disciplined, restrained. Also can bring a desire for austerity in general and penance, okay? Or somebody who helps you work with your fears, work with your traumas, somebody who understands how to hold space and be of service, right? Because you have the servant, the elderly, or somebody, or older partners, relationships with older people will be something you're attracted to. And then the final thing, I say partnerships. No, we're doing psychology. So exchanges, trade. I'm sorry, I'm blinking for a second. I'm like doing the loading signal in my head. Psychologically, relationships attracted to the qualities you develop in yourself in the context of relationships is your austerity, your discipline, your ability to be patient, your ability to manage your time effectively. Saturn represents time, so being able to manage your time effectively and to cut out the things that are not for you, which is also something that Saturn represents. It represents the garbage, the things you're not supposed to have in your life that are distracting you from your destiny, sun. Because Saturn is the son of the sun. These work hand in hand. They're enemies, they're sworn enemies, and they're opposites, but they work together to put you on your path. So Saturn's the things in your life that you're not supposed to walk towards and entertain. The sun is everything that you do need to focus on and walk towards, along with Jupiter. And Mars is like the fire that pushes you forward, right? But Saturn, you are learning how to cut away the dead weight, cut away the fat, cut away anything that distracts you from working on your path, your destiny. And that's why Saturn can be really good, because it also can keep you from being in relationships or getting into relationships that distract you from your destiny, from your path. Somebody who's more willing to be alone and focus on themselves, especially if Saturn's doing well. And if it's afflicted, you're not developing yourself, you feel like you can't be alone. And even in the context of relationships, you can't be alone, but in relationships, there's actually a lot of trauma, fear, insecurity, power struggles, can even lead to, you have a malefic in the 7th, like Mars, or with Saturn, less so Sun, but still a little bit. You can have, proneness towards abuse or aggression or, just negative things, overly restriction, authoritarianness, especially with Saturn and the Sun. So you get the point. But it can manifest negatively, but at the heart of it, really, Saturn can do beautiful things in the 7th, and most people will not think that. But if your whole goal is to have a lot of relationships that stimulate all your senses, then yeah, Saturn can be difficult. But if you can see that the goal, the purpose is to move you forward on your path as a spiritual being, to become more self-reliant, self-sufficient, and become a better version of yourself, then Saturn in the 7th is honestly one of the best things you can have. And so that was the 7th house. I appreciate your time. Like I said, please let me know if this resonates with you, or if you want to share your stories, you have any questions, please, down below. I always appreciate it. I do my best to reply to every single one. And in the next video, subscribe because we're doing the 8th house. We're going to do all the planets in the 8th house, which is an intense house. So that'll be fun to walk through, and I know you guys will enjoy it. Cheers.